Hey there, folks. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will be continuing the story of Sheng and his unexpected journey in the cultivation world. Now, let's get started. It was a big day for Sheng, as he was about to take a significant step in his educational journey, the unified exam. As he got dressed and made his way downstairs, the tantalizing scent of sizzling meaty dishes welcomed him. Their mother had spared no effort in preparing a hearty feast, hoping that this meal would bless Sheng with success in his upcoming exam. His younger sister, eager to be a part of the occasion, expressed her intention to accompany him to the exam site. With a loving smile, Sheng patted her head and agreed that it would be a good opportunity for her to experience the exam atmosphere. Though she pouted slightly, she didn't say anything more, and the family quickly finished their breakfast. As they prepared to leave, their mother offered some motherly advice to Sheng, reminding him not to be too anxious and to do his best. The sound of a car beeping outside caught their attention. Turning around, they saw their father radiating excitement from the driver's seat, waving energetically at Sheng. Today, with Sheng taking his unified exam, it seemed the whole family was involved in this momentous occasion. The siblings hopped into the car, and their father cheerfully drove them out of the residential complex. Although he knew how to drive, he had always ridden a bicycle to save money. However, Sheng, their older sibling, had recently bought him a car. Sheng had initially wanted a more luxurious car, but his father insisted on a more modest choice, considering it a treasure. Inside the car, their father jovially said to Sheng, "Whether the Liu family can produce a top martial scholar depends on you now." Sheng immediately protested, asking, "What about her?" referring to his younger sister. Their father laughed and replied, "Little girl, your turn is still a ways off." The trio chatted and laughed as they made their way to the exam site, finally stopping at the City Martial Arts Center. The usually empty entrance was bustling with anxious parents and nervous exam-taking students, not to mention numerous cars parked along the roadside. Activating his psychic power, Sheng could hear the voices of concerned parents offering last-minute advice to their children. "Do you need water? How about the toilet? Good luck with your exams. Don't be nervous. Did you remember to bring your ID?" Sheng observed this group of young exam-takers. It had been a long time since he had lived a life like an ordinary high school student. Now, he was about to experience what every high school student goes through, taking the unified exam. Their dad gazed at the martial arts center, reminiscing about his own attempt at the unified exam in the same place. Unfortunately, his talent wasn't enough, and the required supplement regimen was too demanding. He ended up making a simple appearance before being weeded out. Turning back to face Sheng, his dad's eyes were filled with pride. He told Sheng that he was 100 times stronger than he ever was and didn't need to say much more. Sheng replied earnestly, understanding the weight of the expectations. Sheng's younger sister, Qinghe, also encouraged her brother. She said, "Brother, do your best. Dad and I will wait for you outside." Sheng smiled, then bid farewell to the two of them and headed alone to the entrance of the martial arts center. He joined the queue to check IDs, and soon he was given a number. Once he crossed the yellow line, the reality of the unified exam became all too real. As tens of thousands of students surged towards the entrance of the White Lake City Martial Arts Center, an atmosphere of excitement and anticipation filled the air. The annual Grand Martial Arts Unified Examination was finally underway. Sheng could sense that the examinees around him were all quite nervous, their eyes filled with determination and apprehension. The Martial Arts Center, capable of accommodating over 100,000 people, was now divided into numerous individual testing rooms. Inside each of these rooms stood devices to measure one's blood energy level and gauge one's combat strength. Long queues had already formed as students began to line up, and each testing room had 3 supervisors. One was responsible for measuring blood energy levels, another assessed combat strength, and the third supervised the entrance, ensuring order and managing the flow of examinees. Each student had a designated number, and as a group was being called in by one of the supervisors, a peculiar situation unfolded. The supervisor noticed that the students lined up in a rather odd manner. While the front and back of the line were densely packed with students, there was a noticeable gap right in the middle. The supervisor frowned, wondering what was causing this disruption. He had been observing this area for a while and realized that the front and back students seemed reluctant to approach the middle section. The supervisor then motioned for Sheng to move forward, and Sheng complied. He also gestured for a chubby boy behind Sheng to advance. The chubby boy, with beads of sweat forming on his forehead, explained that he felt incredibly nervous whenever he got close to Sheng, and his legs would start trembling. The supervisor's brows furrowed as he observed the students lined up in front of Lu Xing. They were now desperately pushing forward, as if they were being prodded from behind. Only then did the supervisor shift his attention to Lu Xing. At first glance, Lu Xing appeared ordinary, but upon closer inspection, the supervisor's heart skipped a beat. It was no wonder that the students were reluctant to come close to him. Lu Xing exuded an imposing aura, like an intangible force field surrounding him. It was so overwhelming that people instinctively wanted to distance themselves from him. Even the supervisor standing next to Lu Xing felt an eerie tingling on his scalp, and the hair on his arms stood on end. The supervisor recognized that such a presence was the result of a martial artist's blood energy level concentration reaching an extraordinarily high level, radiating outward. While the supervisor had encountered such situations before, witnessing this from an 18-year-old high school student was a rare sight. Acknowledging the situation, the supervisor decided to have Lu Xing enter the testing room first, instructing the other students to line up behind him. Grateful for the chance to be away from Lu Xing's overwhelming aura, the other students quickly scattered, eager to distance themselves from what they perceived as a martial arts monster. Lu Xing, resigned to the fact that his presence was disconcerting to others, made his way to the testing room. As he entered, he overheard a young man protesting loudly. The young man claimed that he hadn't taken any prohibited substances and that he had only consumed chicken soup brewed by his uncle, which his uncle insisted was beneficial for the exam. The supervisor remained unconvinced by the young man's claims about the chicken soup. He promptly took the examinee away, firmly asserting that he wouldn't repeat his warning. He offered those who might have consumed any prohibited substances a chance to leave without consequences, emphasizing that their absence would not affect their eligibility for the unified exam next year. The young boy being pulled out of the exam site continued to protest, undoubtedly harboring resentment toward his well-meaning uncle. The supervisor shook his head, recognizing that those who cheated would likely struggle to gain admission to a martial arts university. No institution would admit a student with a record of dishonesty. Finally, it was Lu Xing's turn to undergo the examination. As he entered the testing room, an intense and palpable aura immediately emanated from him, making the atmosphere in the room heavy and oppressive. The two supervisors' faces went pale, and the one closest to Lu Xing involuntarily took several steps back, feeling overwhelmed by the intensity. It was a shocking sight, seeing two fifth-level martial arts supervisors react this way, their bodies trembling and instinctively retreating from Lu Xing's overwhelming presence. The supervisor responsible for testing blood energy levels approached Lu Xing with a needle to extract a blood sample. However, Lu Xing calmly informed him that the needle wouldn't pierce his skin. The supervisor halted his action, eyes widening in disbelief as he looked intently at Lu Xing. After a nod of acknowledgement, he fetched a higher-grade needle from his drawer. To everyone's astonishment, Lu Xing grabbed a handful of these advanced needles and fiercely jabbed them into his hand, demonstrating their futility as they bent without piercing his skin. Faced with this extraordinary display, the supervisors decided to proceed with testing Lu Xing's combat strength while searching for an even more advanced needle for the blood test. Meanwhile, a blonde-haired girl was undergoing her test and, with a punch, saw her combat strength surpass the 100 mark. This gave her hope for admission to Dongning Martial University. Then it was Lu Shang's turn. The staff member, surprised to see a supervisor personally escorting a student, reminded the supervisor that Lu Xing's blood energy value hadn't been recorded yet. The supervisor whispered something into the staff member's ear, leaving the staff member in disbelief. The supervisor glanced at the nearby testing dummy, questioning whether they needed to upgrade to a more advanced one. The staff, although shocked, informed the supervisor that the current machine was the most advanced one available for the unified exam, with a maximum combat strength limit of 990,000. Even facing a level 6 martial artist would have no issue with the capabilities of this machine. The staff member chuckled, musing, "This boy can't be a grand martial artist, right?" The supervisor regained his composure, thinking he had probably been overthinking. He then called out Lu Xing's name. As Lu Xing moved closer, an overwhelming and scorching aura radiated from him, further deepening the mystery surrounding this remarkable student. There was something unusual in the air, a momentary lapse in their confidence, as if they had misjudged something about Lu Xing. As they hesitated, their uncertainty was dispelled by the sight of Lu Xing introducing himself with impeccable courtesy, his politeness putting them at ease. Lu Xing's presence seemed to radiate confidence, and he was about to demonstrate something extraordinary. Lu Xing took a deep breath, and it was as if molten lava flowed beneath a layer of ice within him. The staff member, now feeling slightly more relaxed, couldn't help but ask timidly if Lu Xing was ready. Lu Sheng, in response, took another deep breath, channeling his psychic power and switching to the flame-breathing technique. The Divine Pluto technique amplified his blood energy level, a concept that left the supervisor's pupils contracted sharply, as if they were seeing something remarkable in Lu Sheng's reflection. Both of them, the supervisor and the staff member, watched with disbelief. It was hard to fathom that this was just a high school student taking the unified exam. As Lu Sheng prepared to unleash his ultimate move, it was as if the very foundations of the martial arts center trembled with anticipation. Lu Sheng began with the first stage of the perfect martial path, a technique only the most skilled martial artists could attempt. Then, he activated the 20-fold of the stellar force, a display of power that left the onlookers awestruck. But he wasn't finished. He employed the Grandmaster technique, a move known as 10 Suns in the Sky. It was a culmination of all his power, and Lu Sheng aimed for his strongest strike with a single punch. Boom! The entire stadium quivered as the force of Lu Sheng's strike reverberated through the air. It was a spectacle like no other, leaving the audience in stunned silence. However, just a few minutes earlier, on the top floor of the Martial Arts Center, Chairman Yao, a calm and collected figure, was engaged in a chess match. His opponent, Director Lu of White Lake City's Education Bureau, had lost for the 7th time that day. Chairman Yao, with a light smile, attributed the victories to Director Lu's graciousness. Their peaceful game was suddenly interrupted when Chairman Yao's secretary burst into the room unannounced, a look of frantic urgency on her face. Chairman Yao scolded her for her lack of decorum and asked about the emergency. The secretary stammered as she explained that a White Lake City examinee had broken the needle used for testing blood energy levels. The supervisor wanted a more advanced needle to replace it. Chairman Yu was initially dismissive, believing that high-grade needles were already in use across all exam sites. If one broke, they could simply be replaced. However, the secretary hesitated before delivering the crucial piece of information. The needle that the student broke was the high grade itself. A heavy silence hung in the room as the implications of this revelation sunk in. Director Lu, who had been listening quietly, displayed a great expression of surprise on his face. A high-grade blood extraction needle broken by a student was unprecedented and deeply concerning. He rose from his chair, instructing the secretary to fetch an advanced-grade blood extraction needle and a copy of the examinee's record. The secretary, having already prepared the necessary paperwork, handed it over to Chairman Yao as he carefully read through the documents. His expression changed, and he looked up at Director Lu, whose face was now beaming with delight. With a rising smile, Chairman Yao offered his congratulations to Director Lu. Both of them understood the immense significance of a high-grade blood extraction needle breaking. Breaking such a needle was a rare feat and meant that the student was highly likely to qualify for the provincial top martial arts scorer, possibly even on a national level. As Chairman Yao perused the student's record, he noted that the individual was 18 years old and possessed the martial arts skill level of above 4th level. The chairman felt increasingly overwhelmed by this discovery. Director Lu chuckled in response, his face lighting up with joy as he clutched his round belly. There was something mysterious about Director Lu's reaction, and Chairman Yao couldn't help but sense it. Director Lu took a step forward and, with a mischievous air, inquired if Chairman Yao was aware of the annual military star selection held by the Eastern Military District. Chairman Yao nodded in acknowledgement but then suddenly realized something important. Could it be that this year's military star hailed from White Lake City? Director Lu's smile became even more radiant, and for the first time, Chairman Yao appeared genuinely taken aback. He had always been aware of the military star selection process. Every year, Dongning Province held a prodigy training camp specifically for this purpose. However, the martial prodigies from his own city had usually fallen short, often being eliminated early in the training camp. A sense of awe washed over Chairman Yao's face, and in his eyes, a touch of envy. He had always wished to encounter such a high-caliber martial arts prodigy in his lifetime. Now that he had the chance to meet one in person, he wouldn't miss this opportunity. The two nodded in agreement and headed towards the lower floors where the exam sites were located. However, their journey was suddenly interrupted by a deafening noise that erupted from the center of the Martial Arts Center. It sounded as if something had exploded inside and felt like an earthquake. Chairman Yao's gaze turned toward the direction of the blast, and he couldn't help but wonder what on earth had happened there. Full of suspicion and a growing sense of urgency, Chairman Yao, along with Director Lu, who had also heard the commotion, hurried over to the source of the disturbance. Both of them ran towards the exam site, where the supervisor and staff member inside the room were jolted by the massive sound. What they saw left them in shock and disbelief. A wave of energy radiated from the point where Lu Sheng's fist had struck. The display of the testing dummy showed no value, and the machine emitted a strained creaking sound before shattering completely. The staff member responsible for testing combat strength stood dumbfounded, with his mouth agape and his eyes bulging. The equipment they had been using was designed to measure the combat strength of peak level 6 martial artists, with a testing limit as high as 990,000. Yet now, it had been utterly destroyed by a single punch from Lu Sheng. The unexpected turn of events left everyone at the scene in awe and bewilderment, as they tried to comprehend the incredible power that Lu Sheng had just demonstrated. Chairman Yao, his expression now grave and inquisitive, stepped into the room and questioned the supervisor about the commotion. The supervisor, recognizing Chairman Yao, hurriedly attempted to explain, but the chairman's gaze had already fixated on the shattered remnants of the combat strength machine lying on the side of the room. It was emitting smoke and appeared as nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. In front of this wreckage stood the calm and collected young man, Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng turned halfway to look back at Chairman Yao, and a staff member, who had been overcome by the spectacle, came over sobbing and pointed at Lu Sheng, exclaiming, "He's a grandmaster." Chairman Yu swiftly directed the supervisors to evacuate the other examinees and requested the students waiting outside to be patient for a while longer. Following this, he instructed his secretary and the supervisor to urgently bring the master-level combat strength testing dummy from the Martial Arts Association, emphasizing the need for speed. As they quickly departed to fetch the replacement equipment, Chairman Yao couldn't help but reflect on the young man before him. He marveled at Lu Sheng's extraordinary abilities and thought to himself, "This young man is truly extraordinary." Director Lu, being the first to break the silence, smiled gently at Lu Sheng. He reassured Lu Sheng not to worry about the broken machine and suggested that he sit down and rest for a while, as the new equipment would arrive shortly. Chairman Yao's gaze remained intensely fixed on Lu Sheng, his eyes filled with countless thoughts. Even from a distance, he could distinctly sense the overwhelming aura emanating from Lu Sheng. It was truly unbelievable. As the chairman of a martial arts association and a martial artist at the peak of the 6th level, he felt a hint of trepidation towards an 18-year-old student. Although Chairman Yao was convinced that Lu Sheng was above the 6th level of a martial artist, he still wanted to verify it. Time seemed to slow down as everyone in the room sat and waited for the replacement equipment. Finally, the supervisor rushed back into the room, dragging a large box with the help of several people. They finished setting up the combat strength testing dummy, and Chairman Yao took out an advanced-grade blood energy testing needle, ready to test Lu Sheng's blood energy level. As the needle gently pricked Lu Sheng's fingertip, a drop of red blood fused with a golden hue oozed out. This scene plunged the room into another breathtaking silence. The first to react was Chairman Yao, who stared at the droplet of blood in awe. The blood was so dense and clung to the needle, resembling a radiant red pearl, solidified yet undispersed. The thought crossed Chairman Yao's mind, could this be the blood of a grandmaster? However, he quickly shook his head. He had once personally seen the blood of a grandmaster, and it was far more solidified and possessed a potency that surpassed the drop before him. He was confident that Lu Sheng hadn't yet reached the level of a grandmaster. Nevertheless, it was evident that Lu Sheng was not far away from attaining that status. At the very least, Chairman Yao knew that Lu Sheng had greatly surpassed him. The blood sample was then transferred into a machine for further analysis, leaving everyone in the room in a state of suspense and wonder about the incredible young martial artist before them. The room fell silent as the moment arrived. A numerical value flickered on the screen, 12,233.56. This was Lu Sheng's blood energy level, a crucial indicator of a martial artist's power. But what they saw was nothing short of astonishing. Lu Sheng's blood energy level had actually surpassed 1,200. This achievement was unprecedented in White Lake City's history, and indeed, in the entire Dongning province. The officials were rendered speechless as they had never seen a blood energy value this high. Director Lu, who had been observing the screen, leaned forward, almost jumping out of his seat. His eyes were locked onto the screen, and his face displayed a mixture of astonishment and elation. Chairman Yao, a respected figure in the martial arts community, looked at Lu Sheng with a pleased expression. He couldn't help but laugh as he quoted an old saying, "Heroes emerge in their youth." He complimented Lu Sheng for breaking the blood energy value record for the unified exam in the Dongning province. Lu Sheng, on the other hand, remained surprisingly calm and composed. He exuded an air of confidence, as though this level of ability was exactly what he had expected. As the dust of amazement began to settle, it was time to put Lu Sheng's combat strength to the test. The supervisor in charge of the testing stepped forward and signaled for Lu Sheng to move beside the combat strength testing dummy, a piece of advanced equipment borrowed from the White Lake City Martial Arts Association. After a brief calibration, Chairman Yao gestured for Lu Sheng to begin. Lu Sheng stood quietly before the testing dummy, his entire being vibrating with energy. He took a deep breath and unleashed his full power. Every cell in his body seemed to awaken, and he channeled every ounce of his strength into this moment. With a sudden burst of energy, Lu Sheng began a series of martial techniques. He used the flame-breathing technique, the 20-fold stellar technique, and the Grandmaster technique, a combination that produced an astonishing wave of energy that rippled outwards. It was as if a tempest had been unleashed within the room, and everyone present felt the power surging around them. Director Lu and the supervisor were pushed back by the sheer force of Lu Sheng's energy, as if they were helpless in the face of a massive storm. But Chairman Yao stood firm, his clothes dancing in the wind. His gaze was fixed intently on Lu Sheng, and he couldn't conceal his astonishment. He couldn't help but murmur, This is the will of a grandmaster." What he had sought for years, the embodiment of martial prowess, had manifested in this young man before him. The chairman was at a loss for words, his emotions swirling within him. Director Lu, though not a high-level martial artist himself, understood the significance of what was happening. The presence of the will of a grandmaster in a young man was an extraordinary sign of future greatness. Lu Sheng's future appeared to be nothing short of radiant. Even though the testing dummy didn't shatter as it had been feared, it bore a large dent, clearly marking the impact of Lu Sheng's immense energy. As the surge of power dissipated, all eyes were fixed on the screen, eagerly awaiting the results. The numbers on the screen fluctuated briefly, but then they finally settled at an astonishing 1.26 million combat strength. The room was so silent that you could hear a pin drop. Chairman Yao, who had been at a loss for words, now had to digest the incredible truth. Lu Sheng possessed not only a blood energy level comparable to that of a grandmaster, but also combat strength at the grandmaster level. Even if he was slightly off in his blood energy level, there was no denying that he deserved the title of a quasi-grandmaster. An 18-year-old quasi-grandmaster. It was almost unbelievable. Chairman Yao, with a complicated expression, gazed at Lu Sheng, who stood with his fist retracted. Suddenly, as if recalling something, he asked, "Why didn't you use your inner force?" Director Lu also noticed this and posed the same question. Lu Sheng shook his head, and a fleeting golden light appeared in his hand before fading. He explained that he hadn't reached the 5th level yet. The two men stared at Lu Sheng in disbelief. His words, delivered with the calmness of a tranquil lake, were like thunderclaps in their ears. He had displayed the combat strength of a grandmaster without even reaching the 5th level. The possibilities of what he could achieve when he truly stepped into the realm of a grandmaster were astounding. After a moment of stunned silence, Chairman Yao turned to Director Lu and congratulated him once again. White Lake City had just produced a true prodigy. Director Lu's lips trembled, and his eyes sparkled with pride. He knew that this young man from White Lake City was about to ascend to greatness. Director Lu quickly turned around, urgently instructing the supervisor to notify Chairman Shah and the Eastern Military District about this remarkable news. Lu Sheng's extraordinary achievements had to be shared with those at the highest levels of authority. Outside the Martial Arts Center, Lu Sheng observed the reactions of the other students. Lu Sheng's dad and his sister approached him quickly, their faces filled with curiosity. They asked how the exam went, and Lu Sheng smiled slightly, responding that it had gone better than expected. Ling's eyes sparkled with pride as she expressed her hope that Lu Sheng would become the top provincial martial arts scholar. The trio, filled with joy and anticipation, took a commemorative photo of Lu Sheng's unified exam before heading home. After a satisfying dinner with his family, Lu Sheng once again entered his dream realm, a place where he could review his personal information and glimpse into his potential future. This time, there were significant changes, and they were nothing short of astounding. At the age of 18, he had won the Eastern Military District's Military Star Selection. In the same year, with the highest unified exam scores in the country, he gained admission to Divine Martial University in the royal capital. As he continued to peruse the details, he discovered that by the age of 32, he had advanced to the 7th level Grandmaster. By age 54, he reached the 8th level Great Grandmaster, and at age 60, Lu Sheng was recognized as one of the 4 generals of the Eastern Military District. His life was marked by numerous military achievements. Ultimately, Lu Sheng's life came to an end in the martial year 477 when he was 181 years old. His personal historical rating received an impressive rating of 4.5 stars, granting him access to a level 4 fire seed resource bank. Lu Sheng was mildly shocked by these revelations. He had reached the level of an 8th level Great Grandmaster in his lifetime, a remarkable achievement. However, when he glanced at the spouse column, he was almost floored. Contrary to his previous assumptions, the number of names in this column didn't decrease, it increased by another 3, totaling 5 wives. He waved it off as a joke, unable to fathom how this had come to be. Having reached the level of a Great Grandmaster and gaining access to the 4-star fire seed, Lu Sheng realized that he could now unlock the advanced techniques of the 3 major 11th level martial arts in the world of martial arts. Strong martial techniques were essential for reaching the pinnacle. When the 3 11th level martial arts were revealed to Lu Sheng, he felt an unprecedented joy. The first was the stellar body enhancing technique, which also unlocked the second stage cultivation method for the golden body technique, along with the advanced chapters of the natural breathing technique and crystal meditation technique. These powerful techniques would undoubtedly elevate Lu Sheng's martial arts journey to a new level. Lu Sheng had the will of a grandmaster, and with his newfound techniques, he knew that if he elevated his blood energy level, he would surely ascend to the rank of a great grandmaster. However, he understood that this path wouldn't be smooth. In the world of martial arts, each individual's understanding and martial arts path could vary, even when practicing the same technique. Lu Sheng had learned the 10 Suns in the Sky technique from Sheng, while the stellar body enhancing technique originated from Wang He, a top 11th level martial artist. Their core and essence in the martial arts path would undoubtedly differ, but Lu Sheng was not limited by these distinctions. He firmly believed that every martial art technique was a path to the ultimate truth. He aimed to synthesize and integrate all of them, discovering a martial path that truly belonged to him. Taking a deep breath, Lu Sheng's gaze became even more determined. He was not content with just being a great grandmaster. His goal was to surpass all 11th level martial artists, ascend to the 12th level, and reach even higher peaks. Only by standing at such an unparalleled height could he truly rewrite history and reshape the face of the world. While Lu Sheng and his family were busy preparing for a celebratory occasion in their mansion, the neighbors had a different perspective on the matter. The man next door, who wore glasses, observed the bustling scene from his window. He noticed that lanterns were hung high, indicating a celebration of some sort. He remarked to his wife that it seemed like their neighbors were looking to celebrate something special. However, his wife was less enthusiastic about the Lu family's activities. She complained impatiently, expressing her annoyance at the constant commotion since that family had moved in. The fact that the Lu family could purchase a house bigger than hers bothered her significantly. She glanced disdainfully at the Lu family and recalled a recent incident when Lu Sheng's dad accidentally spilled a basket of oranges. Just then, a car horn blared, and the woman decided to cause a scene. Lu Sheng's father was on the ground, quickly gathering the scattered oranges with both hands and feet, all the while trying to reassure the woman that everything would be cleaned up soon. His anxious voice, however, couldn't quell the increasingly piercing honks from the cars around him. Even though the woman's car could have easily navigated around the oranges, she intentionally ran over them. Her husband tried to persuade her not to speak so harshly, reminding her that they were all neighbors, and they should be more considerate. Hearing this, the woman couldn't believe that her husband was speaking up for the neighbors. Just then, another Lud car horn blared, and she couldn't contain her anger. She demanded to know who was so audacious to honk so early in the morning. Subconsciously, she blamed the Lu family for everything, assuming that it was Lu Sheng's father protesting about what happened that morning. She yelled angrily about the crushed oranges and stated that they could be compensated. She claimed she would send over a truckload of oranges to their house as compensation. Just as she was about to step out and make a complaint, her husband saw the license plate of the car in front of their house and was suddenly startled. Being someone who worked for the government, he instantly recognized the vehicle and the license plate. It was the governor's official vehicle. A massive convoy of cars, consisting of sleek black business-class Mercedes, was slowly approaching. At the very front of this convoy was a stretched top-of-the-line luxury sedan. The unexpected arrival of such an important figure left the neighbors in awe, and they quickly realized that something significant was happening in the Lu family's mansion. A cold sweat formed on a man's forehead as he stood in the front yard of his modest home. He had heard whispers and rumors circulating about a top martial arts scholar making an appearance in their province, but he had never imagined that the governor himself would personally pay a visit. Beside him, his wife was equally caught up in the excitement. She hastily planned to retreat inside the house to change into her best clothes, determined to make a favorable impression on this legendary student. The benefits of a good relationship with the top scholar were self-evident, and she was determined not to let this opportunity slip away. As she was about to head inside, her gaze inadvertently fell upon the Liu family, who lived next door. The Liu family had also been drawn by the honking and the commotion. Over at the Liu family's residence, they too were curiously standing on tiptoes, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening outside. As the man from the black convoy finally pulled up to the front gate, excitement and curiosity reached a fever pitch. The door of the sleek, black-stretched sedan slowly opened, revealing a tall, middle-aged man dressed in a sharp gray suit. With a warm and charismatic smile, the middle-aged man stepped out of the car, his voice resonant and deep. He turned to address the Liu family, who had been watching with bated breath. "Excuse me for my interruption," he began. "Is this the home of Liu Sheng, the top martial arts scholar in Dongning province?" The revelation sent shockwaves through the Liu family. The visitor was none other than the governor of Dongning province, Xia Ping'an. The governor was not just a high-ranking official but also a grandmaster in martial arts. The Liu family was overwhelmed with surprise and joy. Their faces lit up with indescribable excitement and happiness. Meanwhile, the neighbor woman, who had been observing the unfolding events from her window, felt her head spin. In an instant, her world seemed to blur, and she lost her balance, collapsing to the ground. Her mind buzzed with shock and disbelief. The legendary top martial arts scholar was none other than the eldest son of her despised neighbors, whom she had always condescendingly viewed as country bumpkins. Sitting blankly on the ground, the woman was unable to think clearly. She replayed all the unkind things she had done to the Liu family over the past few days, and it felt as though her soul had left her body. As the scene unfolded, Liu Sheng, the young man at the center of this commotion, slowly opened his eyes. He stretched his body, causing a series of crisp cracking sounds from his neck and joints. Looking down at his skin, he noticed a layer of light gray dirt covering it, giving his complexion a somewhat greasy appearance. Having previously reached the first stage of the immortal golden body technique, he had struggled to expel impurities from his body. However, as he had now entered the second stage of the technique, new impurities were being expelled, signifying that Liu Sheng was once again getting stronger. Deciding to freshen up, Liu Sheng took a quick shower. As he dried himself off and walked out of the bathroom, he casually picked up his phone, only to find a heap of unread messages. The majority of them were from his younger sister, who conveyed the exciting news in a series of animated messages. "Bro, you are now the #1 in the country. You've become the top martial arts scholar." The message was accompanied by an excited dancing emoji, capturing the sheer joy and pride that coursed through Liu Sheng's veins. Liu Sheng, still in his room, was surprised by the third message from his sister. In response, he spread out his psychic power, which acted like a tidal wave emanating from his room. His psychic power flowed through the living room on the first floor, where several strangers had gathered. Among them, one individual seemed to be extraordinary. His entire body exuded a fiery aura, and his blood energy blazed like a furnace, emitting intense light and heat. The other martial artists in the room paled in comparison, resembling mere charcoal and dust scattered around a roaring fire. This extraordinary person suddenly looked up and, at that very moment, locked eyes with Liu Sheng. It was evident that their top martial scholar had awoken. In the living room, the man in the gray suit put down his teacup and smiled. Liu Sheng's parents were momentarily stunned by the situation, but their shock transformed into joy when they saw their son making his way down the stairs. As Liu Sheng descended the staircase, Governor Xiaoping and was the first to stand up. He fixed his intense gaze on the confident young man coming down the stairs. Liu Sheng, with his handsome appearance and a physique that exuded strength, appeared calm and composed. His face revealed a rare maturity and steadiness for someone of his age. However, to Governor Xia, he was much more than just appearances. Under the governor's keen observation, Liu Sheng resembled the rising morning sun, radiating a sense of promise and potential. Seeing that his son was now awake, Mr. Liu introduced the distinguished guests. Governor Xia Ping'an, the governor of Dongning province, was the primary guest, followed by the mayor of White Lake City and Chairman Shao, whom Liu Sheng had met previously. Liu Sheng acknowledged the introductions with a nod, then approached Governor Xia to exchange greetings. Afterward, he greeted the mayor and Chairman Shao, shaking hands with each of them. Once the pleasantries were exchanged, Governor Xia began to explain the purpose of his unannounced visit. He had come primarily to congratulate Liu Sheng for achieving the top position in that year's National Unified Exam and becoming the top martial scholar. Although there were still 2 weeks left before the official release of the exam results, Governor Xia assured everyone that the results were practically finalized. He emphasized that Lu Xing's position as the top martial scholar was secure, even without knowing Lu Xing's academic scores. Governor Xia's confidence in Lu Xing's accomplishment was unwavering. He revealed that he had received the news early in the morning and had rushed over immediately to meet Lu Xing in person. He expressed his intention to present Lu Xing, the pride of Dongning Province, with some well-deserved rewards on behalf of the province. With a meaningful glance, Governor Xia signaled his secretary, who promptly stepped forward, presenting several items. Among them was a bank card worth a staggering 50 million, and the second gift was a 400-square-meter residence situated in the heart of Dongning Province. Though it might not rival Lu Xing's current mansion, it was a generous reward befitting the top martial scholar of the province. Governor Xia's smile was warm and filled with appreciation, reflecting the kind regard he held for Lu Xing and the province. He inquired about Lu Xing's future plans now that he had reached the strength of a 6th-level martial artist. Lu Qinghe, standing behind her brother, was visibly shocked upon hearing that Lu Xing had already reached the 6th level. She regarded him with wide eyes, as if he were a supernatural being. Lu Xing nodded in response to Governor Xia's question, revealing his decision to attend one of the divine martial universities in the royal capital. Governor Xia had anticipated this choice and instructed his secretary to produce a stack of envelopes, each containing recommendation letters from all 7 of the divine martial universities in the royal capital. Governor Xia couldn't help but show a bitter smile as he explained the unique circumstances. All 7 of the divine martial universities had reached out to him, requesting that he bring the recommendation letter to Lu Xing. This was an unprecedented situation. He then handed the 7 envelopes to Lu Xing, who was now faced with a monumental decision. Each envelope represented a martial arts sanctuary, a dream for countless martial arts students across the nation. All 7 divine martial universities were waiting for Lu Xing to make a choice. Lu Qinghe, his sister, was awestruck, feeling as if she were witnessing a plot from a manga unfolding in their very living room. After a brief moment of contemplation, Lu Xing shuffled the envelopes randomly and, with closed eyes, drew one out. The envelope he held revealed that he had selected the 7th Divine Martial University. This decision left Governor Xia and the others with peculiar expressions. They had expected Lu Xing to carefully weigh his options and choose the university that suited him best. However, his unique decision-making process had taken them by surprise. Governor Xia commented on the fact that all 7 divine martial universities were established following the heritage of martial saints. While the 7th university might have a slightly less profound heritage, its teaching staff and other aspects were by no means inferior to the other 6. He recommended that Lu Xing take the time to consider his weapon specialization. With that, Governor Xia took out his business card and handed it to Lu Xing, explaining that once Lu Xing had chosen his major and the type of weapon he wanted to specialize in, he should give Governor Xia a call. The governor would personally select and gift Lu Xing a weapon below level 6 to celebrate his achievements. Lu Xing thanked Governor Xia and accepted the business card. Seeing Lu Xing accept the business card decisively, the smile on Governor Xia's face grew even brighter. He stood up to take his leave, but not before bidding farewell to Lu Xing's parents and expressing his apologies for any inconvenience his unannounced visit may have caused. As Governor Xia left, the Lu family was left in awe of the remarkable turn of events. As the family warmly saw off Governor Xia, the mayor, and Chairman Xia at the door, they couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the remarkable turn of events. The father declared that they should have a proper celebration that evening, and the atmosphere within the house remained warm and joyful. It was a day worth commemorating, and the family spent a special night together, filled with laughter and happiness. Meanwhile, inside a dimly lit conference room, several figures were deeply engrossed in studying Lu Xing's profile. It had been years since they had taken such a keen interest in an individual. They could feel that this year might be different. One of them murmured, his eyes shimmering. He was none other than the Mingyu martial saint, Tan Zhongyu. A few days later, Lu Xing embarked on his journey to the royal capital. He bid farewell to his classmates, embraced his family at the airport, passed through security, and boarded the plane. Lu Xing's knowledge of the royal capital was limited, but he understood that what set these 7 universities apart was primarily the fact that each of them contained a complete martial arts inheritance. Moreover, they each possessed a unique divine martial tower. The university Lu Xing had chosen was the youngest among them, established just 57 years ago by Tan Zhongyu, also known as the Jade Martial Saint. He was one of the 3 existing martial saints in their nation, and despite being just over 100 years old, he was considered to be in the prime of his life. Martial saints could easily live for more than 300 years, far beyond the lifespan of ordinary individuals. They were akin to the immortal beings of legends. In their nation's history, a total of 9 martial saints had been born, most of them during the first 150 years of the martial arts era. It was a time of prosperity for martial arts, with various opportunities, inspiration, and a surge of martial arts talents. However, due to turbulent times, many martial saint-level powerhouses perished in battles against ferocious exotic beasts or in what could only be described as civil wars between different nations. Sheng had learned in his history class that during the first century of the martial arts era, their nation and another nation had fought for the title of world martial arts leader. Numerous martial artists were deployed to the battlefield, and several martial saints had fallen in this battle, making it one of the most tragic and heartbreaking wars in centuries. Sadly, many of these great talents didn't die on the battlefield against exotic beasts, but due to internal strife and conflicts within their own nation. As for the outcome of that war, it might be better left unmentioned. Besides Tan Zhongyu, who wasn't born during the tumultuous period, the 2 other existing martial saints in their nation were also survivors of the battle mentioned previously. With this knowledge, Sheng set off on his journey, with the understanding that Tan Zhongyu was both the martial saint and the principal of the 7th Divine Martial University. Sheng had always dreamed of becoming a martial artist of extraordinary prowess. His aspirations were not ordinary, for they revolved around the enigmatic Divine Martial Tower, located within the 7 prestigious universities. The Divine Martial Tower was whispered to possess the remarkable ability to perfectly replicate the life stages of martial saints, showcasing the pinnacle of integration between martial arts and cutting-edge technology. Sheng, however, wasn't particularly drawn to the idea of becoming a disciple of a martial saint. In his vivid dream realm, he had inherited techniques from 10th and 11th martial artists, skills he had yet to fully explore. As for the mere 9th-level martial saint's inheritance, he seemed rather indifferent. His dreams clashed with the mandatory requirements of his nation, which demanded that prodigious talents in martial arts accumulate a specific number of credits at a university before joining the military. The regulations aimed to protect the elite from the front lines, ensuring their safety and the preservation of their valuable skills. Sheng sighed inwardly, as he was aware that his nation's rules would force him to undergo training and acquire relevant professional knowledge within the university before he could set foot on the battlefield. But deep within, he couldn't care less about it. His primary objective was to complete his studies as swiftly as possible and graduate from the Divine Martial University. As Sheng contemplated his situation, a chance encounter occurred on his journey. A vibrant and fresh-faced girl boarded the plane, and to his astonishment, he recognized her. She was Yang, someone he knew from the prodigy camp. Coincidentally, she also happened to be his younger sister's school senior. Just the previous day, Sheng's sister had sent Yang a few text messages, informing her about Sheng's flight to the royal capital, encouraging Yang to be brave. Yang had made the remarkable decision to attend the royal capital's university instead of Dongning Martial University, all to be closer to Sheng, a choice that his sister highly approved of. What's more, as fate would have it, they found themselves seated next to each other on the flight. Sheng couldn't hide his surprise when Yang showed him her boarding pass. He hadn't expected her to be traveling to the royal capital as well, let alone on the same flight. As he looked at Yang, seated beside him, his thoughts took an unexpected turn. In his dream realm, there was a spouse section he couldn't help but recall. The possibility of another twist in his life journey left him feeling somewhat worried. Could it be that destiny was playing tricks on him once more? 2 hours later, they disembarked from the plane, greeted by the grandeur of the royal capital. The magnificent buildings and the bustling cityscape left Sheng in awe. He couldn't help but wonder if the city's grandeur resembled the 1359 military base from his dream realm before it was overthrown. As Sheng and Yang arrived at Jing Martial University in the royal capital, the grandeur and significance of this institution became apparent. The atmosphere was filled with an air of seriousness and commitment, and Sheng quickly realized that this place was no joke. Observing the cleaning workers who were leaping from high places or clinging to windows like Spider-Man, it became clear that this university was home to dedicated and talented individuals. Upon giving it some thought, Sheng decided to accompany Yang to her university. He couldn't help but wonder why Yang, with her talent, hadn't been accepted into the Divine Martial University, and yet she had chosen to attend Jing Martial University in the royal capital. There seemed to be a significant difference between the two institutions, and Sheng found it somewhat surprising. Nonetheless, since they were from the same city, he decided to offer his support to Yang. Lu Sheng took one of Yang's suitcases from her hand and walked ahead, planning to assist her with the registration process before reporting to the Divine Martial University himself. As he walked alongside Yang, he noticed an inexplicable acceleration of her heartbeat, and she couldn't help but feel that they were like a couple starting school together. Yang obediently followed Lu Sheng as they quickly entered the front gate of Jing Martial University. Inside, they encountered a few young men in their early 20s who appeared to be welcoming freshman students. When Lu Sheng and Yang arrived, these young men's eyes lit up at the sight of Yang, and they approached her with beaming smiles and an exceedingly attentive attitude. One was burly, proudly displaying his arm muscles in a tank top, while the other had blonde hair and was tall and thin. Both young men offered to carry Yang's suitcases for her, which startled her. She immediately sought refuge behind Lu Sheng, who remained calm. Lu Sheng handed one of the suitcases to the two young men. However, upon realizing that Lu Sheng was with Yang, a strong sense of competition and perhaps jealousy appeared in their eyes. One of the young men inquired whether Lu Sheng was also a freshman at Jing Martial University. Lu Sheng, who had learned how to conceal his true abilities, shook his head and explained that they were friends, and he had come to help Yang register. Upon hearing that Lu Sheng wasn't a student at Jing Martial University, the expressions of the two young men relaxed slightly. They could sense that Yang had feelings for Lu Sheng, but as long as Lu Sheng wasn't from the same school, they perceived the threat as reduced. After all, they believed in the saying that being near the water means you're the first to get to the moon. The two young men proudly led Lu Sheng and Yang into the school, introducing it along the way. They mentioned that although Jing Martial University might not be the absolute best in the royal capital, it was considered a top-tier institution in other provinces. The university boasted numerous martial arts practice rooms, and students had the opportunity to enter the Divine Martial Tower 3 times per month. Lu Sheng, intrigued, asked whether everyone was allowed to enter the Divine Martial Tower. The two young men proudly explained that the Divine Martial Tower was a national treasure, and all martial arts students, not just those from the royal capital, had the privilege of using it. Even martial artists from other provinces could apply for qualification through the Martial Arts Association to access the tower. Lu Sheng quickly grasped the convenience enjoyed by students from the 7 Divine Martial Universities. They had unrestricted access to the Divine Martial Tower, allowing them to enter at any time without needing to apply. The blonde young man, keen on ensuring Yang's well-being, smiled and reassured her that there were people in the school who would stand up for her if anyone ever bullied her. However, he emphasized that Yang must avoid provoking students from the 7 Divine Martial Universities. Intrigued, Lu Sheng couldn't help but ask why the students from the Divine Martial University should be treated with such caution. The blonde man, slightly annoyed by Lu Sheng's persistent questions, impatiently responded, explaining that students from the Divine Martial University were considered crazy. They were assigned missions that involved combat with exotic beasts on their very first day of class. The blonde young man warned Lu Sheng that he would get into trouble if he ever crossed paths with one of these students. Lu Sheng offered a slight smile and nodded in acknowledgement. As the group arrived at the enrollment area, Lu Sheng prepared to leave after helping Yang with her registration. He assured her that she could contact him by phone if she ever needed help. Yang waved goodbye to Lu Sheng and watched as he departed. The blonde young man, however, seemed to be growing increasingly annoyed with Lu Sheng's presence. His impatience was evident as he addressed Lu Sheng's continuous interjections and questions. The burly young man standing beside him also expressed his discontent with Lu Sheng. Curious about Lu Sheng's choice of university, the blonde young man inquired about the university Lu Sheng planned to enroll in. But at that moment, with Lu Sheng not by her side, Yang's expression shifted to a cold and indifferent one. She glanced at the two young men and calmly stated that Lu Sheng was planning to enroll in the 7th Divine Martial University. Her tone turned rather proud, and she added that Lu Sheng hailed from White Lake City, and his name was Lu Sheng. The two young men were momentarily stunned by Yang's words. Her confident revelation seemed to have a profound impact on them. Their eyes widened, and their bodies began to tremble slightly. It was as if a realization had struck them. This year's top scholar in the National Unified Exam was none other than Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng's reputation and achievements were clearly remarkable, and this newfound knowledge left the two young men in awe. Lu Sheng was dragging his suitcase behind him while following the GPS on his phone. The bustling royal capital buzzed with life as he weaved through the streets, his eyes drawn to the many young students. He arrived at the entrance of a university that stood out from the rest, the 7th Divine Martial University. Its entrance was strangely deserted, in contrast to the bustling streets outside. But it was undeniable that the university itself was enormous, dominating the landscape. At the entrance of the 7th Divine Martial University, a massive gate stood tall, hundreds of meters wide and a staggering 100 meters in height. On this gate, gilded characters spelled out the university's name, 7th Divine Martial University. Just below the name, the signature of a martial saint, Tianzhong, was proudly displayed. It was an awe-inspiring sight, and the divine tower, visible from the entrance, added to the grandeur, giving off a sense of majestic mountains. Sheng was taken aback by this unexpected spectacle. The personal inscription by a martial saint in the imposing divine tower left a lasting impression on him. He realized that this journey might hold more surprises than he had initially thought, and this university might be the key to interesting events and personal growth. With newfound determination, he continued walking towards the welcoming reception at the entrance. A welcoming banner greeted him, and several young men and women were busy with their own activities. Sheng was the first visitor they had seen in a while. A blonde girl enthusiastically took his admission notice, and after a quick glance, her eyes sparkled with recognition. Excitedly, she called over her friend, who was sitting next to her, and pointed at Sheng. She revealed that he was the national top scorer of this year's unified exam, a rare achievement indeed. The news quickly spread among the students, and they all became curious about the handsome freshman who stood before them. It was the first time the 7th Divine Martial University had admitted a student with such a distinction, and this sparked even more interest among the students. One young man, who had been busy polishing his sword, paused to listen. He scrutinized Sheng from head to toe before suddenly jumping up, sword in hand, and landing in front of him. Intrigued and seemingly unfazed by the confrontation, the young man asked Sheng if he was indeed the top scorer of the year. Sheng responded with a confident and genuine affirmation. It was then that the young man, still wielding his great sword, suddenly swung it down in a fierce manner. Sheng remained composed, not even blinking, as he calmly, and with a smile, met the young man's gaze. The young man, satisfied with Sheng's demeanor, slowly nodded and then raised his great sword to point in a direction. He instructed Sheng to keep walking in that direction and reassured him that there would be signs along the way to guide him. As Sheng continued to make his way into the university campus, the trio of students he left behind began to discuss him with great curiosity. The young man, intrigued by Sheng's accomplishments, couldn't help but ask about his score on the unified exam. One of the girls searched for the information but couldn't find it. However, another girl hinted at rumors that this year's national top scorer had a blood energy level at the 6th level and had broken several records during the exam. This revelation left the young man with the great sword somewhat shocked, and the other girl was equally surprised. They anticipated an interesting turn of events with Sheng's presence. Sheng entered the campus, and to his surprise, it appeared nearly empty, as if he was the only one walking there. The lush surroundings were serene, and he couldn't spot many people. It was a stark contrast to the bustling entrance. Suddenly, a chubby student named Lindsay spotted Sheng and eagerly approached him. He introduced himself as a freshman and complained that he had been wandering for half an hour without encountering anyone else. Like Sheng, Lindsay was laden with a suitcase and backpack. He was relieved to find someone who might help him navigate the campus. Sheng, reminded of his high school friend Ming, felt an instant connection with Lindsay. He smiled and agreed to assist him in finding the student dormitory. As they walked further into the campus, they eventually reached a spacious residential area where a large group of new students had gathered. They were all dragging their luggage and displayed youthful looks and a sense of pride. However, their expressions were now tinged with anger. A student was suddenly sent flying and landed heavily on the outskirts of the crowd. He looked up in shock and terror, with a hint of fear in his eyes as he gazed at the person who had sent him sprawling. This tall young man, dressed in an orange outfit, was clapping his hands with a smile, seemingly pleased with himself. He identified the fallen student as Su Xiaoming, the martial arts top scorer from Nanjing province. The young man mockingly praised Su Xiaoming for being the first to withstand 2 of his attacks and encouraged him to keep working hard. However, the sarcasm and mockery in his words were evident to the surrounding crowd of freshmen. The tension in the air was palpable as no one had managed to enter the dormitory area so far. A blue-haired young man turned to his friend Huadong and asked in a low voice if he thought he could handle it. Huadong was the 5th top scorer in the National Unified Examination and the 3rd top scorer from the royal capital. However, he admitted that he wasn't very confident. He had only recently achieved the 5th level as a martial artist, and at this moment, his face revealed both seriousness and worry. Huadong, the fifth top scorer in the National Unified Examination, analyzed the situation with a concerned tone. He observed that the young man in the orange shirt was very strong, likely already at the peak of the fifth level of martial arts with some proficiency in vital qi, an internal energy technique. Huadong admitted that he might not be able to withstand more than 3 attacks from this formidable opponent. The young man beside Huadong couldn't believe the situation. Even their strongest contender, Wang, might not last more than 3 attacks. He suggested taking turns to wear the opponent down and then having Huadong finish the fight. However, Huadong disagreed, explaining that facing a peak 5th-level martial artist with a blood energy level of 1,000 and supported by internal energy made wearing him down a challenging task. Huadong also noticed another student standing near the entrance who appeared even stronger, possibly already at the 6th level. The new students were shocked and fearful, as they had never heard of a student reaching the 6th level before. In most martial arts associations, a 6th-level martial artist could qualify as a chairman. The young man in the orange shirt reminded everyone of the university they were attending, emphasizing that strength was the ultimate rule. He reiterated that anyone who could withstand 3 of his attacks could enter, and those who withstood 5 could bring their luggage. He raised his arms and declared that past glories meant nothing in the 7 divine martial universities. Strength ruled, and everything had to be earned with one's own hands. With a cold smile, he held a bunch of defeated students' room cards and dropped them on the ground, emphasizing that without strength, they might as well return home and live as ordinary people. His words deeply impacted the young freshmen, filling them with feelings of humiliation, unwillingness, and self-doubt about their future paths. Lu Sheng watched the scene with a growing sense of irritation. It seemed that every time he went somewhere, there would always be people trying to preach life lessons or the law of the jungle to him. He was frustrated, especially when those preaching were not particularly strong themselves, individuals he could easily dismiss with a single swipe. The situation was exasperating for Lu Sheng, who was already well acquainted with these kinds of encounters. Lindsay stood beside Lu Sheng. He was radiating excitement as he eagerly anticipated what was about to unfold. With a nonchalant grin on his face, Lindsay wasted no time in expressing his sheer enjoyment of trampling over the self-righteous seniors who had gathered around them. He reveled in the shocked and fearful gazes they shot his way, his confidence seemingly unshaken. With a sense of determination, Lindsay placed his suitcase on the ground, indicating that he was about to take action. The crowd's attention was now firmly fixed on the chubby boy, wondering what he had in store. Turning to Lu Sheng, Lindsay couldn't contain his enthusiasm. He proudly declared that he was this year's top martial scholar from Sichuan province, ranked 19th in the entire nation. His boastful words seemed to hang in the air, setting the stage for what was to come. In a brash and audacious move, Lindsay decided to step forward through the crowd, defying what he perceived as nonsensical rules and authority. He shouted at the top of his lungs, challenging the status quo and taunting those who stood before him. "What's up with these stupid rules? Stop with your nonsense. It's too late to beg for mercy. Watch Daddy kick your stupid ass and teach you a real lesson." Lindsay's words echoed through the crowd, leaving a momentary hush in their wake. Suddenly, a flash of white light illuminated the area, and a burst of energy engulfed Lindsay. He was sent hurtling through the air, like a sandbag, crashing heavily several meters away before rolling like a ball for another 10 meters. Remarkably, despite the dramatic tumble, Lindsay landed on the ground without any noticeable injuries. He rubbed his buttocks, admitting his carelessness, acknowledging that the orange shirt guy was stronger than he had anticipated. His face flushed with embarrassment, Lindsay turned to Lu Sheng, who stood nearby. Lu Sheng, however, responded with a reassuring smile, patting Lindsay on the shoulder. It was evident that their friendship remained intact, despite the unexpected turn of events. As Lindsay recollected himself, Lu Sheng's attention was now drawn to the orange-shirt young man who had delivered the impressive kick. The crowd's gaze instantly converged on Lu Sheng, and all eyes were now on the impending confrontation. The orange-shirt guy locked eyes with Lu Sheng, an air of amusement playing across his features. His gaze swept over the backpack on Lu Sheng's back, and he teased Lu Sheng, questioning whether he was prepared to face his 3 attacks head-on. Lu Sheng, seemingly unperturbed, decided to take action. He put down his backpack and snapped his wrists, calmly declaring, "Now we can start." This announcement was met with a collective murmur from the onlookers who believed that Lu Sheng was grossly underestimating the danger he was in. The young man in the orange shirt, his eyes glinting with a cold, ominous light, spoke with a sinister grin, "I'll show you what true cruelty is." Before his words could fully fade away, he unleashed a kick of remarkable precision and power. The energy wave he generated was tangible, tearing through the air and producing a piercing howl. A small whirlwind formed on the spot, causing nearby freshmen to shield their eyes and retreat slowly. Sheng, however, was not intimidated in the least. With an air of calm and confidence, he extended one hand and reached straight for the young man's face. His movements appeared deliberately slow, almost as if he were savoring the moment, despite the critical situation. To the surprise of all present, Sheng's hand shattered the energy wave with ease. In the blink of an eye, he had closed the distance and was standing directly in front of the young man in the orange shirt. As the dust settled from the dramatic showdown, the young man in the orange shirt found himself in an almost surreal predicament. He struggled to free himself from Sheng's grip, his voice quivering as he pleaded, "Let me go." However, Sheng's grasp felt like an inescapable abyss, an indescribable sense of immense fear coursing through the young man. Sheng, undeterred, exerted a bit more force, tightening his hold on the young man's neck. With a fierce downward swing, the ground beneath them cracked open, and large fissures spread across the hard cement surface. The young man in the orange shirt lay sprawled on the ground, resembling a defeated animal, his body twitching slightly. The onlookers, including Lindsay, the chubby boy, were left in stunned silence, frozen in place. Lindsay's mouth was agape, wide enough to fit a fist, as he processed the astounding turn of events. Nearby, another senior student who had witnessed the entire scene stood frozen, still trying to comprehend what had just transpired. Holding his drink, the senior student stared blankly at Sheng, but as their eyes met, a wave of tension washed over him. He felt like prey that had been singled out by a fierce predator. With a hint of fear, he watched as Sheng inquired, "Can I go in now?" The senior nodded hesitantly, and Sheng calmly walked past him. With a nonchalant demeanor, Sheng made his way into the dormitory area, searching for his room. Finding the room corresponding to the number on his card, he was met with an unexpected surprise. The student housing at the 7th Divine Martial University was nothing short of luxurious, with individual villas for each resident. Sheng's dormitory was almost comparable in size to the luxury mansion he had recently purchased for his family. The best part was that everything here was free. Lindsay, who had been following closely, advised Sheng not to mistake his dorm for the room of the national top scorer. But before he could complete his sentence, it dawned on him. He turned to Sheng with an expression of shock, swallowing hard, and hesitantly asked, Are you Sheng?" Sheng responded with a knowing smile and a touch of amusement. He asked, "Do I not look like it?" Lindsay couldn't contain his excitement, bursting into laughter and enthusiastically giving Sheng a thumbs up. He confessed that he, as the top martial scorer from his province, had never expected to encounter someone of Sheng's caliber so soon after entering the university. Lindsay explained that he had specifically chosen to attend the 7th Divine Martial University to avoid the kind of prodigies he believed only existed in legends. Sheng found himself pondering the reason why someone of his caliber, the national top scorer for the year, would choose to attend the 7th Divine Martial University. He had expected prodigies to opt for more prestigious institutions, but to his surprise, he was here. He recalled Governor Xia mentioning that all 7 divine martial universities were considered equivalent in terms of their reputation and quality. Curiosity got the better of him, and he turned to Lindsay, asking why he thought the 7th divine martial university was considered weak. Lindsay scratched his head, admitting he wasn't entirely sure, but he mentioned that the number 7 had a perception of being the weakest. Historically, national top scorers usually chose one of the older divine martial universities. Lindsay had even checked the results of the National University Martial Arts competition over the years and noted that the 7th Divine Martial University occasionally ranked at the bottom. Shrugging, Lindsay added, "So, wouldn't you say it's the weakest?" But Sheng didn't seem concerned about the university's reputation or strength. He believed in taking things as they came and was more interested in exploring his new environment. Upon opening the door to his dormitory, Sheng gestured for Lindsay to join him later. He entered the well-furnished room, finding it quite luxurious. Even the sofa was made of beast leather. Sheng's curiosity led him to press a button on a remote control he discovered on the table. A massive 4K screen lit up, revealing a campus forum. The forum featured various posts from strategies for conquering the Divine Tower to profiles of prominent figures at the 7th Divine Martial University. There were even live broadcasts of battles against level 5 beasts. However, one post caught Sheng's attention, the hottest topic of the day. A complete video of the battle between Qin Yuan and Xiaolan for the title of the top senior student. The video had garnered over 14 million views, and Lu Sheng realized that this forum was a valuable source of the latest information and entertainment. It appeared that Chen Yixian and Xiaolan were currently the two strongest students at the 7th Divine Martial University, based on the comments under the pinned video. Lu Sheng clicked on the video, which began to play. Two young men in their early 20s stood facing each other, one wielding a long saber, and the other brandishing a Chinese dao. They appeared to be in the campus square, just inside the university's entrance. However, as the battle became more intense, a prompt popped up, indicating that the 15-second preview had ended and he needed to register and pay with forum points to continue watching. Lu Sheng shook his head, recognizing that video websites had the same restrictions everywhere. At this point, he hadn't even obtained his student ID, let alone had the means to register or earn forum points. He closed the video and decided to explore further, going upstairs to discover a small open balcony with a panoramic view of the distant scenery. Prior to entering the university, he had meticulously prepared 30 glass vials filled with the latest supplements. These elixirs were to fuel his cultivation needs in the short term. As he ingested the potent concoction, he felt a warm flow of energy circulating within his body, invigorating his spirit. Lu Sheng had recently started practicing the second stage of the immortal golden body technique, an ancient and powerful method that promised extraordinary abilities. He was deeply engrossed in his training, his focus unyielding. The future of immense power and greatness beckoned him, and he cherished every moment of solitude. However, his tranquility was shattered by a sudden, loud knocking that echoed through his chamber. Lu Sheng was a man who detested any form of interruption during his cultivation. It was not just a preference, but a rule he had set for himself, and he was determined to maintain it. The intrusion was made even more annoying when he noticed his door damaged, as if someone had violently barged in. Lu Sheng's face remained expressionless as he rose to confront the disturbance. Slowly, he opened the door, revealing a tall young man standing there, his hair styled like a mushroom, scrutinizing him with disdain. The young man began speaking with arrogance. "So, you are Lu Sheng." But before he could finish his sentence, Lu Sheng's response was swift and powerful. Without a moment's hesitation, he unleashed a powerful force that sent the intruder flying like a cannonball. The unfortunate fellow soared over 20 meters before crashing heavily into a wall. The two companions who had accompanied him were left stunned and speechless, their faces reflecting a mixture of terror and shock. Lu Sheng's stern voice resonated in the air. "Learn how to knock on a door before coming to find me again." The pair, now shaken and humbled, cautiously knocked on the door again, this time with a gentler touch. Lu Sheng appeared at the door for the second time, his eyes clouded with confusion as he looked at the two visitors. The mushroom-haired man who had been sent hurtling through the air struggled to lift himself off the ground. His two companions wore expressions of utter astonishment and fear. The mushroom-haired man couldn't help but wonder, wasn't Lu Sheng just a freshman? How could he be so powerful? His initial intention had been to intimidate the freshman and make a name for himself, but he had clearly underestimated the power of Lu Sheng. Growing impatient, Lu Sheng questioned their true purpose, wanting to know if the seniors at the university were genuinely interested in bullying the freshmen. The two visitors quickly produced a large box and some documents, including Lu Sheng's student ID and some daily necessities. They explained that they were from the student union and were there to welcome the new freshmen. They offered Lu Sheng access to all the equipment at the 7th Divine Martial University and the promise of a bottle of level 4 beast blood, a valuable resource for cultivators. Lu Sheng nodded in acknowledgement, impressed by the generous benefits that the university had to offer. However, he couldn't help but cast a skeptical glance at the senior who had been sent flying earlier. He doubted that their intentions were purely to deliver warmth and goodwill. The hostility from the senior had been evident, and it was clear he had intended to use Lu Sheng as a stepping stone to establish his dominance. The senior, covered in dust with resentment in his eyes and grievances etched on his face, waited as if expecting an apology. Lu Sheng, still emotionless, tilted his head slightly and asked, "Were you expecting an apology?" The senior with the mushroom haircut quickly assured Lu Sheng that no apology was necessary, and they would take their leave immediately. Lu Sheng closed the door, still expressing his thanks for the delivery. As the three individuals hastily retreated from Lu Sheng's residence, they couldn't help but look back at the imposing villa behind them. Each of their faces bore an expression of lingering fear, especially the one with the mushroom hair. He had not anticipated being overpowered by a mere freshman with a single punch, and the realization of this left him humbled and shaken. The other two in their group glanced at their mushroom-haired companion but made it clear that they had no intention of assisting him in seeking revenge. Their eyes conveyed sympathy and understanding as they silently distanced themselves from his earlier arrogance. The mushroom-haired young man coughed twice and made a dismissive gesture. He had no immediate desire for revenge. He vividly recalled that even when he had encountered a 6th-level beast on a mission, he hadn't been injured as badly as he had been by Lu Xing's single punch. Regret coursed through him for trying to establish his authority through Lu Xing, a freshman, but he couldn't simply let the matter slide either. Suddenly, Lu Xing's door opened again, and catching sight of Lu Xing's gaze, they hurriedly explained that they were about to leave. They made promises to fix his door and even pretended to call someone to take care of it immediately. Lu Xing nodded and closed the door, seemingly satisfied with their attempts to make amends. Returning to his room, Lu Xing resumed watching the video on his student card. The footage was now in high definition, and he watched the recorded fight between two formidable martial artists. One wielded a saber and was dressed in a crisp suit, while the other wore a tank top and camouflage pants, brandishing a large Chinese dao. There was no idle chatter between them. They engaged in a fierce battle, exchanging powerful blows and demonstrating their incredible combat skills. Lu Xing's expression turned serious as he watched the fight unfold. These two fighters were clearly at the pinnacle of young martial artists in the nation, and their abilities were awe-inspiring. Lu Xing calculated with his fingers, estimating that, without using the power of a grandmaster's will, he would need to use at least 60%, or perhaps even 50%, of his strength to defeat such opponents. Considering that Lu Xing's internal energy had recently reached a minor completion, which conservatively estimated to elevate his combat power to over 2 million, he realized that even at 50% of his strength, his power couldn't be underestimated. Ultimately, it was the student in the suit, Chen Yixian, who emerged victorious in their intense duel. Both of them were clearly not yet grandmasters, but they were extremely close, which made them formidable opponents. Lu Xing couldn't help but wonder if there were even stronger individuals at the other 6 divine martial universities. Lu Xing had learned from Linzai that enrolling at the 7th Divine Martial University was not always the ideal choice, as many previous national top scorers had opted for other divine martial institutions. This was Lu Xing's first time in the royal capital, and he recognized the need to push himself even harder, considering the abundance of prodigious talent in the world. As one video ended, the next one automatically began to play. Its title boldly proclaimed the strongest freshman in the history of the 7th Divine Martial University beating up a senior ranked in the top 300 on the first day of school. Indeed, the video chronicled the scene where Lu Xing had effortlessly overpowered the senior in the orange shirt, shattering his attack and displaying his incredible strength. Reflecting on the footage, Lu Xing couldn't help but acknowledge that the scene appeared rather violent, but it also made clear that he was a force to be reckoned with at the university. The editor of the video that showcased Lu Xing's overpowering of the senior seemed to have a peculiar sense of humor. In the latter half of the video, they turned it into a sort of meme, repeatedly showing the senior being thrashed to the ground by Lu Xing with bang 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 sound effects and musical rhythms. It was a rather pitiful sight to watch, and in the barrage of comments and live chat, Lu Xing couldn't help but feel a sense of sympathy for the senior as he watched this unusual video. Just then, Lu Xing's stomach rumbled, reminding him that it was time for a meal. Checking the time, he headed to the cafeteria to sample the culinary offerings of Divine Martial University. The university's cafeteria did not disappoint, and it was bustling with students. Among them, he spotted Linzai, who was there with his arms laden with a variety of foods, including skewers, meats from different beasts, snacks, and dim sum. Linzai approached Lu Xing with a smile, jokingly asking him not to make fun of him for eating so much. However, his teasing came to a halt when he saw the abundance of food on Lu Xing's table, which was no less extravagant. Lu Xing was seen engulfing a burger that was taller than a man in a single, monstrous bite, resembling a predator devouring its prey. Linzai shoveled a mouthful of food into his mouth and glanced around, informing Lu Xing that many people were watching him. At a nearby table, 2 senior female students were whispering praises about Lu Xing, with one even casting flirtatious glances his way. However, at another table, the sentiment was not as favorable. Some students from the same grade, who knew the person Lu Xing had beaten up in the video, were eager to test their mettle against him. Despite the attention, Lu Xing remained unfazed and continued eating. The atmosphere in the cafeteria began to shift when several individuals stood up and made their way towards Lu Xing's table. The crowd's attention was drawn to them as 4 individuals halted before Lu Xing. The leader among them, also a freshman, extended his hand with a cold smirk, introducing himself as Wu Fan, ranked 17th nationwide this year. Lindsay's expression tensed as he sensed the malicious intent of these newcomers and was about to stand up in defense, but Lu Sheng's words urged him to stay seated and continue eating. Lu Sheng seemingly ignored Wu Fan and continued with his meal, casually asking if Wu Fan had come specifically to disclose his exam scores. This response seemed to rattle A.B. Baldy, another of Wu Fan's companions, but Wu Fan intervened, narrowing his eyes at Lu Sheng and starting to laugh. He acknowledged that he was no match for Lu Sheng but began to hint at the importance of social relationships in this new environment, different from their previous school. Wu Fan suggested that Lu Sheng should know his place. Before Wu Fan could finish his insinuations, Lu Sheng interrupted him, pointing out that if Wu Fan already acknowledged that he was not a match for him, why provoke him? Caught off guard by the question, Wu Fan watched as Lu Sheng calmly placed his chopsticks down and pushed his plate forward slightly, preparing to stand up. The expressions of Wu Fan and his companions darkened, anticipating a confrontation. Wu Fan launched the initial attack, but Lu Sheng was quicker. In a fluid motion reminiscent of the earlier video clip, Lu Sheng reached out his hand, aiming for Wu Fan's head. With a single-handed grip, as if catching a ball, Lu Sheng pressed Wu Fan to the ground, displaying the same dominance that had been so memorably captured in the viral footage they had all seen. The cafeteria echoed with the resounding message that Lu Sheng was not to be trifled with. And there you have it, the captivating tale of Lu Sheng's incredible journey in the cultivation world. If you want to find out what happens next, stay tuned because we'll be continuing this story in our upcoming videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join us on this thrilling adventure. Until next time, folks. Thanks for watching.